open that page, I'll search for my fix, find what I need in the deep dark abyss.
Welcome to another podcast, AI Skeptics podcast episode. Today we are really pleased to have Connecticut Senator James Maroney with us. What a pleasure to have you, James. I want to introduce you, but I actually want you to introduce yourself even more. And Jake has like a leading question about that.
Here's the lead in. Hi, James. Thanks for being here. The lead in. I noticed that the email invitation for this virtual recording came from a brewery type beer email address. So that got me interested right away. Can you explain?
People respond when they think it's from beer. If they think you're a politician emailing them, no one replies. No.
Yeah. It worked on me. I was like, I need to talk to this guy right away.
So I guess I can work that into my bio. We'll start with the less important to more important. So I'm a state legislator from Connecticut. I represent the 14th district. If you're outside of Connecticut, that doesn't mean much. It's Milford, Orange, West Haven, and Woodbridge. So in between New Haven and Bridgeport, those are the places people would have heard of. I guess most relevant to this podcast and listeners are I've worked on a lot of tech legislation. So in 2022, I worked on and helped to pass our consumer data privacy bill. 2023, we passed the government use of AI bill, updated our data privacy bill, worked on children's data privacy, consumer health data privacy. 2024, we proposed a framework for regulating private industry use of AI that did not pass. 2025, tinkered with that framework, proposed that did not pass, but we did update our consumer data privacy, and within that, we did make a lot of updates to profiling, which is basically algorithmic automated decision making. And so through that, we gave residents the right to opt out of any automated decision. Previously, it was solely automated decisions, and we did require impact assessments if you're using automated decisions for consequential decisions or decisions that have legal or significantly similar consequences, if that was defined in the bill. Of course, with the data privacy bill, you have so many exemptions that it doesn't, employment and bebanking, insurance, areas of big concern are left out of a consumer data privacy. We mainly got at housing, which was one of my other concerns through the bill in 2025, where we gave you a right, if you were rejected, to see an explanation of why. And, we've heard of so many examples with tenant screening algorithms, people being denied based on wrong data. So the right to see the data, if it's wrong, to have it corrected and then to be reconsidered. Again, my concern is 50 to 75% of large landlords are using tenant screening algorithms. What if they're making decisions on wrong data? How are you ever going to get an apartment? So that was last year. This year, we were able to pass two bills in Connecticut, Senate Bills 4 and 5. Senate Bill 5 is a large bill that I think we're going to talk about later, so I don't need to go through too much of it. Senate Bill 4, we did model the California Delete Act to give a one-stop deletion mechanism for having data brokers deleting all your data. We did some work on surveillance pricing or algorithmic pricing, facial recognition, updated our data privacy bills for facial recognition, banned the sale of geolocation data, and a few other things within that bill. So that's legislatively some of the things I've worked on. Connecticut, the legislature is a part-time, well, technically part-time. We spend a lot of time doing it, and so most of us have other jobs. I work at a law firm, but I also recently started a brewery, and that's why you got the sound.
That's the real topic of the conversation. Yeah. It's the brewery.
I was sure that brewery was going to be the last, the thing that stuck in my head. But actually, the other stuff you mentioned is like even more impressive, perhaps, than starting a brewery. On behalf of your constituents, thank you for
James,
doing those laws.
I was reading your bio and I was just like, this guy's my hero. Like, how did you decide? I mean, I guess you're a lawyer, right? So how did you decide to go into? Oh, you're not a lawyer.
No, I'm actually not a lawyer, and so. Yeah, just a legislator, so I make laws, but I don't.
Okay, I thought you said you work at a law firm.
I do, but actually, I work in the marketing and outreach at a law firm.
Oh, okay.
So I do the help with seminars and networking and marketing. So,
got it. So, can you tell us a little bit? I mean, sorry to put you on the spot here, but like, how did you decide to become a policymaker? Like, what was your motivation originally? Were you already about the tech stuff when you joined, or how did it happen?
Yeah, so I go, some people come to the legislature passionate about an issue, and that's what actually, makes them run and brings them there. Sometimes an issue finds you. And so the initial reason why I ran for the House. Well, I first ran for Board of Education. So, prior to the brewery, my business was SAT prep and, educational consulting, helping high school kids to get into college and find ways to pay for that and find the schools that match them. And so when I ran for the Board of Education in 2011 when my son was getting ready to go into kindergarten. I figured that was my experience. I lived in the town I grew up in. I went to the public schools here before I went to Yale. And so I thought that was where I could help. After a year, a state rep seat came open, and some people reached out to me and suggested I consider running. And, even though I was only on the Board of Ed for a year, I saw a lot of education was state policy. And you also had the ability to impact more. I come from a small business background, so you can work on other issues as well. So I really came passionate about workforce development and, creating opportunities. But so I was elected to the House in 2012. In 2014, the voters said, you know what, you're not quite ready for prime time. Why don't you take a few years off and then we'll see. So I lost my reelection by 151 votes, but who's counting?
Wow, that's really tight. That's crazy tight.
And then in 2018, I ran against the same person for 3 times and I won the rubber match, but I was elected to the Senate. And so when I came back to the Senate, the first bill I worked on was actually computer coding, was requiring every school in Connecticut to offer computer coding. And again, because when I was talking with people at Yale Entrepreneurial Institute, they said as soon as their companies got venture funding, they were told you have to leave Connecticut. And it wasn't cost of doing business or cost of living. There wasn't enough entry-level computer coding talent. So at that time, they were telling them you have to go to Cambridge, up to you, Kathy, or over to Silicon Valley. And so, that's what I worked on. We also required every teacher in the teacher training program to have exposure to teaching computer coding. And so, I was interested in tech legislation as a small business person. I remember the first time I was looking through and taking Facebook ads out for the business and doing online advertising and, realizing the ability to target people as a marketer is fantastic, but always as a human, it was a little scary, right? Knowing exactly how narrow you could target things.
Right. So. That's what my next question, which is like, given your background, it's you've been working on extremely progressive technology bills. Like, how did you find yourself on that side? Is it just because you knew too much as a marketer, or?
No, actually, it just fell in my lap, I'll say. And that Senator Bob Duff had, after California passed CIPRA, the California Privacy Rights Act, he thought we should run something similar in Connecticut. And so and it ended up coming to my committee. My committee that I co-chair is the Consumer Protection Committee. So we get to work on, I said once, we get to work on all of the vices. And then someone got offended and said tech wasn't a vice. I was just trying to make a joke, though. But we get to work on.
We here at the AI Skeptics would disagree. We think that's a perfectly good
to refer to as a vice.
My committee gets.
I like that. So, James, what you're saying is you're like, oh no, we're just trying to protect consumers, and guess what are the current threats to consumers? Is technology harms. Yeah, that's actually a really reasonable answer.
And so it came to my committee, and then I worked on it. Couldn't get it out of committee the first year. They were able to tell people that it was going to kill small business. And second year, we got it out of the committee, got it out of the Senate, but couldn't get it out of the House. And then the third year, which ironically enough, that's the same amount of time it took me to pass the AI bill, the third year, and it often does for big bills, take that time. We were able to get it passed. So I worked on that for a while, and just in digging in, at the end, just before, and so in April of 2022, I was getting really interested as I was learning more about the data privacy, about automated decision making. And so we actually wrote into the bill at that time, creating an AI task force in Connecticut. And so we wanted to look at automated. I thought it was a little too far to put in too many regulations then, when I was only going to dig into them for about a month. But we did look at them in the task force, and, a Yale professor is a constituent of mine, Professor Sadir. I asked him, actually, I cited his work when we passed the data privacy bill, because one of his studies was when people feel more confident about how their data is being used, they're more likely to share it. And we saw that with Apple when they switched to making you opt in for privacy. In the EU, people opt in at significantly higher rates than they do in the US, where they're more confident on how their data is going to be used. And when I told him I wanted to get into the automated decision making, he recommended that I read Virginia Eubank's Automating Inequality, which I read that summer, and we had a lot of great people present to us. So, the plan always was to go state government use, then private industry use. So state government use bill was, I think we had 4 no votes throughout both legislatures, and the other one took 3 years. So it's
wow. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about Connecticut as a state in the 50 states. But first, Jake has done his homework and has a bunch of questions about the actual act that you guys recently passed, right, Jake?
Yes, I do. The AI or Online Safety Act is what I've written down here. But the big AI bill that got over the line this year, I'm interested to hear what's in it. I know some of what's in it, and also how it changed from the last 2 versions that didn't get over the line. Like what concessions did you have to make, or what changes did you have to make to find a framework that worked well enough to become a law? And then maybe we could talk about some of the specific pieces in it.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think ultimately it just took time building a coalition, right? And so with any big law, you need to build a coalition outside the building, and you need to have people, reaching out to their legislators that they want you to do something. And so I think it just took a little bit of time as that pressure built. And we see that in polls. I mean, it's bipartisan. Over 80% of people in poll after poll want the government to regulate AI. Almost 70% of people don't think the government will go far enough. And I would say, in this bill, this is a first step. It's definitely doesn't go, I'm sure, far enough, and we will build on it in the coming years. The big change was, we had looked at more of the consequential decisions in the past. We had required impact assessments, and these are, I'm ready for all these questions I want to ask you guys because of what you do at Orca and Ocean Network. And,
all right, well, let's jump into just one specific area of the bill where we might get into those meaty questions. So, automated employment decision tools like AI used in hiring, for instance, hiring, promotion, firing, all those kinds of employment-related decisions. This bill sets out a new framework for how to track the use of AI and the impact of it there.
Yeah, it's like an optional kind of thing, but if you do it, then you get to defend yourself with it. But I don't quite understand the details. Could you explain what the incentives are for businesses?
Yeah, and so it's 2 parts, right? So there's one part that's the disclosure, and it's really basic on the disclosure. And it says to the developers, they have to, give the information to the deployers that they would need to comply with the law. But again, it's very basic. What's the purpose? What are you considering? Expected outcomes, but also the trade name of the system, right? Like what, so that if this happens, you can look into it, right? If you feel that it's a discriminatory outcome for whatever reason. Right. So this is really just a first step. And then the second part is we updated our state discrimination statutes to say discrimination by AI counts, right? And then initially it was presence or absence of anti-bias audits would be considered a defense. But we basically, as you said, it's not requiring you to do the anti-bias audits, it is strongly suggesting that you need to do the anti-bias audits. And have you seen that's been one of the big flashpoints over the, I think, the last 2 years since the change in administration, to where we were looking at the preventing algorithmic discrimination and testing, doing bias audits and testing, where that's become more difficult to require in law. And so we kind of borrowed from the Illinois law that was the first employment law. The New York local law 144 was the first one, but Illinois was the first statewide one, where they just updated their labor to say that exactly that, using AI to discriminate, and then you can't use AI to discriminate, and then they published through regulations, they updated to be more specific on what that actually means. We don't have, because we're enforced by the AG for these rules, we don't have the ability to do rulemaking in Connecticut, which does make it a little different. A lot of the other states will kick off specifics to some agency to promulgate regulations. We can't do that.
I see. Okay. Well, we're doing a lot of things really quickly, but I just want to back up and understand the structure of this. And I do like this example for hiring because it's a pretty familiar example for most people. The first thing is so if I'm applying for jobs in Connecticut, via LinkedIn, how many notifications, disclosures do you think I will get? There's a lot of AI. Does LinkedIn have to notify me of it using a filtering tool to show me or not show me to a recruiter? That's my first question. And then if the recruiter is using filtering systems first to just get rid of a bunch of people who don't look like a good fit, and then to decide, okay, the people who seem qualified, which one is the best fit? I could theoretically get 3 or 4 different disclosure notifications. Is that what you're seeing happen?
Yeah. And so, hasn't gone into effect yet, but it is possible that that's what you could see happen, or it could be one notification with, multiple trade names, right? Because they're using different systems, again, depending on how you're using them. We have it written in also that, the developer could take on the responsibilities for the deployer, meaning if you're using Indeed or LinkedIn to do the hiring, they can send the notification on your behalf rather than you sending it in individually. Unless then, as you mentioned, if they were using another program app to do further sorts, then you would have to disclose that.
I'm really curious to see how LinkedIn will respond to this. I mean, and I don't want to foreshadow the third topic so much, but how did you withstand the lobbying efforts, obviously, surrounding all of this? But then the other thing I want to mention is when I'm pitching our auditing services to companies, one of my favorite examples is I don't know if you remember this, but the Apple Card was accused on Twitter. It was viral. This is when Twitter was Twitter, of being sexist because some guy, some fancy programmer guy who's actually famous, but I can't remember his name. He applied and so did his wife, and he got a much better deal than his wife. And he's like, we've been married 30 years. We share finances. This is outrageous and it's sexist. And I'm always you don't want to be that company that gets accused publicly of bias and you have no response to give. Wouldn't you want to have in your back pocket, hey, here's how we measure bias. Here's why we're pretty sure that we're doing fine. Here's the way we ongoing monitoring that we do. Is that the kind of defense that we're talking about for the companies?
Exactly. That's what we're trying to incentivize, getting companies to do the right thing, right? To do the audits. And it's in their best interest to make sure that they're fair and accurate. Why would they want to accidentally reject the best applicants for their company? They want to make sure in the long run. And it's interesting you mentioned that, all the things. In one of the original task forces, someone who was on our task force had built systems like that for hiring, for a well-known company. And when he showed everything, how I could explain and go through, and he's the one who kept telling me, they keep telling you it's hard to test for bias. It's not. In a binary decision, it's fair. And that's what I wanted to ask you to explain. How do you, because that's the pushback. Oh, it's too hard. You can't possibly do it. But,
oh no, it's not hard at all. It's not hard.
Well, what's hard is deciding what you have to account for when you take that measurement.
Right.
Because you might be like, oh, we're worried about different hiring rates between men and women, and so you measure those hiring rates, and where it's binary, like they're hired or they're not, you just compare averages. And that is very easy. It's even easy to do the statistics to say like they're statistically significantly different. But then the person doing the hiring will come back and say, well, we hired men at a higher rate, but the men were also more qualified. They had more degrees in the relevant areas. So like you should account for qualifications in terms of degrees. Okay, you have to take that into account, like statistically. But then, and so maybe you do that. Okay, now the gap's a little smaller. Once we account for everyone's qualifications, there's still a difference in hiring, but it is smaller. And they'll say, well, you should also account for how many years experience they had, because the men had more years experience. That's why we hired them. So you end up having a long negotiation over what should we account for in taking that simple comparison of hiring rates.
And that's exactly right. And that's where it gets nuanced. It will depend on the kind of job, right? So if you're hiring someone for customer service representative, there's less requirements, but some requirements. Right. If you're hiring someone for brain surgery at MGH, there's a lot of requirements and they're really particular. So it's not like any hiring algorithm is going to be measured for bias in the same way. It's a kind of bespoke set of accounting factors, depending on the job type.
So that's why one thing I really like about what you've set up here in this bill is because that is a very contextual process to figure out what should we account for in this area. It sounds like it's going to come up in the following way, like based on your bill. Company gets in trouble or they're suspected of doing something wrong, and then they have a chance to say, this is how we thought about it. It's not against a predefined template. The company can come with the bias audit or investigation they've done and said, this is how we approached this comparison, and they have a chance to explain their reasoning, which could be contextual. And I think that's good to give that chance.
And well, I as I understand it, James, it's because you don't have the AG to kick over to the enforcement or to develop the rules, you're actually going to be asking auditors like Orca to come in and establish rules for a given company. Is that right?
So that is a separate part of the bill where we create a pilot program for the IVO's independent verification organizations, and that's something that I've been thinking through is. Eventually I see us getting to where we may require audits, right? Just like if you're a large publicly traded company, it's mandated you have a financial audit for some of our systems and high, consequential decisions, some of those important life decisions. I think at some point we'll require or strongly suggest that you do audits. And so how do we make sure that the audit industry is there, that there are enough auditors for that, and what's first? So we're doing a pilot program. A group called Fathom had proposed this. Since we've passed our bill, and a lot of people are fighting that. They don't want third-party audits coming down. But since we've passed the bill, Illinois passed their bill, 315, which does require. So this is an optional where we've actually hired UConn to kind of help us measure the effectiveness of the program. It's over a few years, and then we'll decide whether we want to expand it, discontinue, a start, stop, continue, change it, stop it, or just continue it the way it is. But they required audits for the catastrophic risk, any system that's capable of creating catastrophic risk. Similarly, Tower was defined in both California and in New York, Alex Boer's the RAISE Act, but they went further and required that third-party audit.
But they're requiring third-party audits for particular types of risk.
Correct.
Yeah, so that's really interesting to me, and especially considering the recent news about OpenAI agents breaking loose from their sandboxes. Which, by the way, I have my personal gripes with the framing of that. When American Airlines computer system broke down for a week and all the flights were grounded, it wasn't like, oh, a superhuman intelligence did that and it's not our fault, Yeah. No, that was our fault and we're sorry. But OpenAI is just like, they did this, I don't know how they got so smart. It's like, guys, you suck at security is what's happening here. But anyway, but I do think, we're seeing like unexpected, clever things that of breaking into other systems, and maybe people breaking into our systems, and it does add up to some kind of catastrophe. And I don't even know if they have any idea how to control that. So that'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah. And
I've got one more. Oh,
sure.
I've got one more question on the current bill. I know we're, as expected, we could talk about this current bill for a long time, but we will try to save a couple of minutes for a third topic. Before we do that, I want to ask one last question on this bill. I think I saw that enforcement, as you said, is left to the AG. There's not a private right of action in this bill that passed. Is that right? And could you talk about that, private right of action versus AG enforcement for these kinds of violations?
Yeah. And so this is, yes and no, I would say, on the private right of action, and I'll explain why. But on the new requirements, right, on the disclosure requirements, there was no private right of action. That was just AG enforcement. And a lot of times I feel like the harms, right, what matches the harm to the consumer, and that's a notice. And so I think that a penalty from the government probably suffices there. Where we updated the anti-discrimination statutes, it would be the regular process. So if you felt you were discriminated against, you could still go through Connecticut Human Rights Organization and file a complaint as an individual. And so partially the reason for making people aware that an AI system is being used is so that if they do feel that their rights, are being violated, that it was discriminatory, now they can avail themselves of those the other existing tools. So
that's great.
Got it. That's wonderful. So this is the best segment of this episode so far.
I love James.
Great that you didn't do something, you did it.
I love this bill. Wait, please. We have to go to the third topic, but I want you to talk a little bit about chatbots and like the part of the bill around chatbots and child protection.
Yeah, and it's another area where if I ever start my podcast, the Pints and Policy podcast, I'm going to have you on and ask you questions.
Oh, I'm going to drink your beer.
And I'll bring you some of my beer, ship it, whatever it is.
Perfect.
We're going to try to get your band down here to perform. We got our entertainment permit now, so.
Yeah.
But the chatbots we approached we took piece modeled off what New York State did in their budget last year, thanks to Senator Kristen Gonzalez, who worked on that. But if a user is expressing suicidal ideation, it has to shut down the conversation and point them to resources. We did go a little further than what they had done, or risk of doing harm to others, a desire to do harm to others. So it's not just suicidal ideations. It's also if you express that in doing harm to others, because we did have a murder-suicide in Connecticut where there is a lawsuit. They are attributing it to ChatGPT. We'll see how the lawsuit comes out. But we thought that we could go a little further, and that's for both adults and children. That piece.
Right.
The next piece is just for children, that you have to put in controls to reasonably, prevent the chatbots from leading children into sexually explicit conversations of, doing self-harm, or other harmful topics that we have listed out in there.
What kind of penalties do these AI chatbot companies have to endure if they don't follow the rules?
Yeah, so this one, there actually is in the children's section a private right of action. So there's both AG enforcement, where I believe it's we use CUTPA, Connecticut Uniform Trade Practices Act, as the vehicle for enforcement, which gives the AG more tools when they're trying to enforce. I believe that's $5,000 per violation. If it's a willful violation, it's higher. And then it does allow for the parents, or it does allow for a private right of action in the case of harm to children. So,
James, I'm just flabbergasted, and I'm so impressed. I really love it. And I guess my last question, which is we could spend a couple minutes on, or you could just give a short answer. But like, how did you do this? I see that you're giving a lot of credit to people in other states, lawmakers and local and state lawmakers, and I see that this is a evolving ecosystem. I imagine that you're in constant conversation with other folks in other states, but there's definitely you're going faster, I would say. And maybe there's a couple others with you, but can you just describe the national scene around these kinds of state level AI regs?
Yeah. And so, I mean, last year there's a lot of talk about the moratorium on any AI. Yeah. And that's also why in the employment bill, we don't mention AI. It's automated employment decision systems. We did change our technology a little, or not our vocabulary a little in there, the words we used. But there was bipartisan pushback, and then they tried to get in the National Defense Authorization Act, and again, bipartisan pushback to, if you're not going to do anything, allow the states to regulate. And we do see Utah, is out front on a lot of great AI policy. Texas.
We actually had Zach Boyd on the podcast a couple months ago.
Fantastic. Yeah. From their Office of AI Policy, which is great, and their sandbox, and they're using it to help create good legislation. And so
we love that guy.
Yeah. Part of our bill, we actually, after we spoke with him, he said, we included in our plan for the sandbox the potential for reciprocity with other existing sandboxes, because it would make sense. Like if you're talking about financial or insurance, where we have similar rules in our states, we should allow for something that, if they've gone through their process, we'll give them the same protections. Maybe they would do the same for us. And there may be areas where we have different laws, but finance and insurance, especially, they're pretty consistent across states. And so, but we wanted to explore that possibility for reciprocity in our sandboxes there. But there are a lot of legislators. So Rep. Fiafia from Utah, myself, Rep. Priestley from Vermont, Senator Hester from Maryland, Reps Bonner and Elkins from Minnesota, Giovanni, Representative Capriglione, who passed Trega in Texas, Senator Rodriguez, who passed the Colorado AI Act, Delegate Maldonado.
I don't want to say anything negative about a particular person, but I live in Massachusetts, which is a super blue state, and I'm not feeling like it's about to happen here. I just feel like there's lots of crosswinds.
Yeah, and there's so I do work with some of the legislators. So anyway, I was going through. We have a steering committee. We've put together a multi-state group. So there's NCSL, National Council for State Legislators, has a task force, but we actually have an even larger group. It's an unofficial Princeton, Mahir at Princeton Center for Information and Tech Policy helps to convene us. We get together monthly. We bring in speakers. We share information. Just recruited more legislators when I was out at the NCSL. So that's, I think the saying is like, alone you can go fast, together you go far. And we know that we have a long way to go, and that working together, and for a few reasons. One, to bounce ideas off of each other. But one of the things, Senator Rodriguez, I reached out to him when I was doing data privacy. He got his across the finish line in 2021 when I couldn't get mine. I'm like, how'd you do it? And we started corresponding and we became good friends. And the thing we say, like why we created the group, is misery loves company. We've all gone through this battle that unless you've gone through it, it's really hard to understand what it's like and how much pressure there is in lobbying. And it's just, most legislatures are part-time legislators, and they don't have the time to get educated in these. And these are complex topics. Yeah. So
they are. Well, okay. So I guess my takeaway is that it's actually ordinary not to have figured all this out, and you guys are extraordinary. And so I want to just thank you for your work. It's really cutting edge, and we really appreciate it as auditors, but also as just like citizens that care about these issues. So thank you.
And just hearing how you're building up, in lieu of a federal government effort here, you're building up a really wide coalition, it sounds like. I mean, you're mentioning many states and, bringing on more and more. So it's really inspiring to see you put together this patchwork, and it's providing what we've got right now. So it's great.
Daniel, we're trying to bubble something up from the States. And so I heard a good terminology this weekend. We're not going to call it a patchwork because that's how they argue against a patchwork of regulation. We're putting together a network of legislators who are working on this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just what you just said about like, oh, like share sandboxes, like smooth the way for if you've passed the test in Utah to pass the test in Connecticut. That is exactly directly against that complaint that the AI companies have or the tech companies have about like having, that's the argument for the moratorium. And I'm glad you're pushing it back against that narrative.
Yeah, and
That's
they
amazing.
also used 1,200, they say 1,200 AI bills across the country. There were 1,400 liquor bills in the same year and 9,600 labor bills in that year. And so,
and yet somehow Miller High Life is sold in every state. I don't know how it works.
They figure it out.
How do they do it?
Right.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, James Maroney, thank you so much for your work and thanks for joining AI Skeptics. We should probably stop there, even though I'd love to have a beer with you and talk for another few hours next time.
But I also just need to give you a shout out. Rep Elkins recommended your book, Weapons of Mass Destruction, to me. It's a phenomenal book. So people, and I didn't get it though until I met you at a conference and read it. But it's a great read. So thank you for everything that you're doing. And Jake, it's great to meet you.
Thanks so much.
Great to meet you too. Thanks for being here, James.
All right. Join us next time on AI Skeptics.